With us now, former foreign policy advisor to the Bush administration, author of The Genius of Israel, coming next month. Dan Senor, Emily Austin, anti-Semitism advocate and advisory board member for CASEPAC. Nice to see you both. Dan, I want to start with you. 8 p.m. tomorrow, presidential address from the Oval Office, maybe his first on foreign policy for President Biden. He's going to link Ukraine and Israel in his address to the nation. What do you make of what he didn't say in Israel and what he needs to say tomorrow night to the American people?
Leland, I think what he needs to keep saying, and I hope he will, which is what he said in the 60 Minutes interview, where he compared in the U.S., not in Israel, but in the 60 Minutes interview in which he compared Hamas to the Nazis. He compared what Israel is experiencing right now and talked about it being the deadliest day for Jews in the history of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. In his first address since the October 7th massacre, he compared Hamas to ISIS. So let's take a moment and think about, those are markers he put down. Let's think about how the U.S., through the course of 3 administrations, Obama, Trump, and Biden, confronted ISIS, and certainly the way the U.S. and the allies confronted not the Nazis. It was to eradicate the threat, full stop. That was the marker, consistent with the rules and the laws of war, which Israel is committed to. And I just think he's put down those markers, and he has said he's on Israel's side. If you're on Israel's side, while Israel is doing fighting the equivalent of the Nazis and ISIS, nothing else needs to be said. He's established those parameters.
All right. I hear you on that. It's interesting he didn't say it when he was in Israel. I noted the change. I know you did as well. Emily, we're going to put up live pictures right now, I believe, of Chicago, where there is a pro-Hamas march. I'm wondering what you make of this. You think this is people who actually understand what they're marching for and celebrating, or is it just a bunch of people who are gathering on what they think is the cool side of a progressive issue?
I will tirelessly repeat myself on this matter. There is such a difference between being pro-Palestine and being pro-Hamas. If you are pro-Hamas, you are pro-terrorism, and you should be extradited from the United States immediately. Because if you are pro-terrorism, it means that you are likely a violent human being and you have no right to be in the United States or on a college campus or marching the streets of Chicago or anywhere else. So I don't know if they're uneducated or if they're really just violent people, but it's unacceptable. I'm pro-free speech. I'm also pro-consequences. So if people are going out there and advocating for Hamas, a terrorist organization, there should be serious consequences in place.
Well, we'll see if they are and whether the FBI starts making some arrests. Dan, the president seems to not have addressed yet the left flank of his party, that being Rashida Tlaib, who again today doubled down on some very, shall we say, concerning rhetoric. Take a listen.
I want him to know, as a Palestinian American, as also somebody of Muslim faith, I'm not going to forget this. And I think a lot of people are not going to forget this. And it's not a threat.
If it's not a threat, I'm not sure what it is. But how does the country, I think, and specifically President Biden, reckon with this?
I'm like I find those comments by Rashida Tlaib and others completely and utterly jaw-dropping. And so do most of the American people. If you look at these polls that have come out, recent poll by CNN, another poll by the Washington Post, overwhelming majorities, high 70s, 80% of Americans support the U.S. government standing closely, locked arm in arm with Israel during this war. So, which is understandable, right? Because you see the forces of barbarism facing off against the forces of civilization. And most Americans know that they want to be on the side of the forces of civilization. They're not on the side of the people raping women, beheading babies, burning children, kidnapping civilians. That's not the side the American people want to be on. They want to be on the side of the forces that are combating that. And the amazing thing about the IDF is they say, look, we'll fight this fight. We need your help. We need munitions. We need arms. We need funding. But our soldiers are the ones that are going to expend their blood on this fight. And I just think that's something the American people rally behind. And when they hear that kind of rhetoric like you just played, it just is. To call it extreme is an understatement. It's like coming from another planet. So I think it's a huge problem.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.